Welcome back to New Money. This evening we're discussing short-term insurance. My guest, Edith Tixeri-McKinnon. And if you'd like to email, you can send your email. Queries will appear on the screen. Edith, we talk about an older person, older car, lost them to get from home to the shops and back, write-off. Right? Companies writing off at much lower values.
Yeah, a lot of our quantum disputes or unhappiness from consumers is that they don't want their vehicle written off. I guess it talks to our quite tough economic environment where consumers know that whatever they're going to be paid for the write-off is not going to be sufficient to replace them, to replace the vehicle with something similar. It's probably going to cost more. So although, the settlement will be based on the value of the vehicle, whatever you've insured, market, retail, at the time of the loss, it's still not going to be sufficient, to cover them for exactly the same vehicle, especially when you've got an excess to pay and there may be other costs financially. So a lot of consumers come to us not wanting their vehicles written off, and we try to mediate, between the insured and the insurer and see if they can accommodate such situation, although the insurer ultimately has the right to decide how to settle a claim.
But you always have the right to accept money in lieu of settlement.
Yes, you do.
And then obviously do the repairs yourself. Yes. But then you want to make sure that once you've done that, you can still get the insurance. You can't drive without insurance.
Exactly. The risk is that you're probably going to go to a panel beater that will charge you less, but there may be problems with the quality of the repair work, whereas if it's not a write-off and the insurer wants to repair, my advice is allow the insurer to choose the repairer, allow the insurer to repair and pay for those repairs directly to the panel beater. Because if there are any comebacks, you can go to the insurer. You can look to the insurer to rectify and not have to deal with the panel beater directly.
Let's just talk about one thing that's very overlooked, people not always realizing what warranties they have in their policy.
Yes, especially around...
And that's critical, isn't it?
Yes, security measures that have to be in place for there to be cover. I can think of, in motor vehicle insurance, tracking devices that have to be active and working at all times. So you've got to ensure that they are in a working condition, that you pay your subscription fees, failing which at the time of the theft or the burglary, you may find yourself without any cover. The same with alarm systems in your home that have to be in working order. They need to be tested. Some of them require logging, records so that the insurer can see whether you typically do arm your alarm when you're not in the home. And again, the same issues, otherwise no theft or burglary cover.
And that can be catastrophic, really.
Catastrophic.
It can, those warranties. I've got other questions, but I'd like to get to some emails, because when I leave the program and they say, you didn't get to my email. So Peter in Honeydew, I have had a problem with a claim due to load shedding. Insurers have told me that new conditions were implemented. Who must prove that I received such notification?
So it's not a question of whether you receive, it's a question of the insurer proving that it sent you notice of any change to the policy terms and conditions. They have 31 days to give you notice of any changes before implementing those changes and before those changes become effective. An insurer who fails to do that in our office will say, well, then you can't apply the new provision or the new term to the insured's claim. It's not a question of proving that you received it, it's a question of proving that they sent you notification to your preferred method of communication. So if they can show us email address is what you gave them, or cell phone number, then they're basically off the hook, provided they've given you proper notice, 31 days.
Edith, I think of my first lecture in legal theory, and that's going back some years. Does the post office act as the agent for the person receiving, or for the agent for the person who's sending out the notification?
It's probably sending.
Yeah, because today, when we don't have a postal system.
no.
So
Most communication is via email, very little by post or even by fax anymore.
So maybe just a note to viewers, please, if it's important that you communicate with your insurance companies, giving them an email address. So if there's anything that they need to communicate with you, you can't afterwards say, well, I'm not receiving a postal address. Joanne in Pretoria said, is it fair for insurers to repudiate a claim because of late notification when they've not been prejudiced? I think about someone with a holiday home, hasn't been to their holiday home, pitches up 6 months later, or things like that. I mean, the concept about late notification, is that a big play in your lives?
We do see it, absolutely, and then we need to look at the circumstances of the loss. How did it occur? Was it a holiday home? How long had the damage been ongoing? For example, a burst geyser in a holiday home can cause, a lot of damage. But again, was that disclosed to the insurer? Because ordinarily, if it is disclosed as a holiday home, the premiums will go up to cater for the very fact that these losses are not always easy and they're not always easily detected. And so it almost covers the insurer's prejudice in that regard. So we'll investigate those circumstances very carefully, look at the policy wording. The insurer will always have to show materiality of the prejudice that they suffered. If they're not able to show prejudice, then we won't easily allow an insurer to escape liability on the basis of late notification.
I think of defence of someone claiming money, prescription. Does the insurance company automatically have a deadline if you haven't claimed a repudiation on late notification?
So most policy wordings will contain a provision to say you've got to submit a claim within 30 days of your loss. Some will say 60 days, so it all depends on the contract. But apart from that provision, there's also prescription 3 years. And the whole point about bringing your claim to the insurer as soon as possible is because the evidence is there. It's easier to assess, easier to validate a claim. The longer you leave it, the more difficult it becomes, and therein lies the insurer's prejudice.
Because you said 30 days from claim,
date of loss.
But date of loss, but it may only be 90 or 120 days before you realise you've had a loss.
Exactly. So it's when you become aware of the loss. Absolutely.
Okay. Then Jules in Saxonwell said, does the insurer have the right to make any request which is not reasonable in order to validate a claim? I don't understand how long that piece of string is, but he's indicating, can they ask anything?
No, it has to be a reasonable request. And the policy provision in most policy wordings say a reasonable request. They're not allowed to request something that's totally irrelevant or appears to be irrelevant to the claim, just if they're on a fishing expedition. That is not permitted. So as long as the request is reasonable, but we again assess the reasonableness against the circumstances of the loss and the claim itself.
Then Graham in Rondebosch asks, if one receives poor service from a broker and the insurance company and the company can one complain to your office? So is service a referral to your office?
Absolutely, absolutely. We will investigate at this stage the phase ombud that deals with intermediary services. So if it's an independent broker not tied to the insurer, we can't investigate those complaints because the phase office deals with that. But any service-related issue relating to the insurer, we will investigate. And if we find that there is maladministration, gross maladministration, in fact, we also have the jurisdiction to impose what is called a compensation award against the insurer in favour of the complainant.
Ian in Witbank says, what academic education and what experience do employees in your office have? You're all lawyers, aren't you?
The adjudicators, yes, they've got legal backgrounds. Some are admitted, others aren't. Many have experience both in law and also in the insurance industry, so that combination.
George in Niza says, I've just had a claim with the insurers who have knocked me back saying that I'm underinsured and want to reduce the claim by 30%. I disagree, as I do feel my home is insured correctly. What can I do?
get a proper valuation by a quantity surveyor, because the insurer will have had its expert setting out in a report why they believe you're underinsured. You then need to also think of appointing an independent expert to counter that if you're going to challenge that valuation.
What people always forget is that you've got to insure new for old.
Yes.
You can't say, well, my couch is 20-year-old, it's only worth 500 Rand. You've got to say, well, what will it cost to replace that account? And that's what you've got to be insuring for. And that's often why people think they're not underinsured compared to assessment by the assessor. Patrick in Durban says, my question relates to cyber insurance. Have you had any claims referred to you, and what advice do you have regarding this form of insurance?
We have had a few already complaints. My advice is that it's quite a technical product, technical insurance product. Read your policy terms and conditions. If you don't understand exactly what is being covered or excluded, then speak to your advisor, speak to your insurer, because they're quite technical as regards what is covered and what is not covered.
I'm going to sneak one more in. It says, from Norman in Westcliff, says, am I able to claim interest on a claim that should have been settled 8 months ago, which has now been settled?
You can try. You can try, and if there's been again an unjust delay for the claim that we in our office find will be gross maladministration, then we would ask that as part of compensation. But if there is a justification for the late processing of the claim, like you haven't provided documents that you were supposed to provide, you were asked, and as a policyholder you didn't, then we wouldn't impose interest against the insurer. But there may be circumstances where we will for delayed claims payments.
Well, Edith has commented in our program this evening of the number of claims that were repudiated and have now been paid. It's so important to understand the importance of their office. However, before a claim gets to the stage, it's important that all information that is material is provided to insurers to avoid the claim giving them a problem. Insurers should also make sure that they are aware of all the terms and conditions in their policy. Rather have your policy underwritten at the time of securing the policy than having your policy underwritten at the time of claim. Adit, thank you for joining me this evening. It's important to note that our program is to provide information and should not be construed as advice. Next week's program will once again be dealing with estate planning, and if you need to get hold of me, my details will appear on the screen. Thank you for watching, and good night.